Return from the Abyss, Book 1.
Chapter 7. The First Hunt and Hints of Power. Dawn came to Greyhaven with the metallic clang of the city gates opening and the gradual crescendo of voices as merchants set up their stalls. Kayden stood outside the Fulcrum Guild building, watching the eastern sky shift from deep blue to pale orange. He'd been waiting for 20 minutes. Sleep had been impossible again, his body too conditioned to constant vigilance to truly rest in the unfamiliar comfort of the inn. The bone sword hung at his side, wrapped in cloth to avoid unnecessary attention. His new clothes, purchased yesterday with part of his giant rat bounty, felt stiff and foreign against skin that had spent a decade in rags. Simple leather trousers, a dark wool shirt, and a worn leather vest that at least had the advantage of not falling apart at the seams. "Kayden!" Fenn's voice cut through the morning bustle. The young mage jogged toward him, already out of breath despite covering maybe 50 meters. His robes, different ones, Kayden noted, though equally stained, flapped around his scrawny frame like the wings of an agitated bird. "You're early. That's great. Very professional. I like that." "Couldn't sleep," Kayden said simply. "Oh, well, I mean, who needs sleep, right? Sleep is for..." Fenn stopped mid-ramble as another figure emerged from the guild entrance. "Ah, there she is." The woman who approached made Kayden instinctively catalog threat parameters. Height advantage, at least 10 centimeters taller than him, probably 180. Build, heavily muscled, particularly the shoulders and arms. Stance, confident, weight distributed for quick movement despite the armor. Weapon, a two-handed axe that would require both hands for most people, but she carried it one-handed over her shoulder with casual ease. She had short, black hair that stuck up in deliberate spikes, multiple piercings running up both ears, and arms covered in the kind of scars that came from years of close combat. Light chainmail covered her torso, leaving her arms bare to display the scar tissue like badges of honor. Her face was all sharp angles, strong jaw, high cheekbones, eyes that assessed him with the same professional scrutiny he was applying to her. "So," she said, her voice rough around the edges like someone who spent a lot of time shouting, "You're the rookie, Fenn's new project." "Kayden Ash," he replied, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Frank. Nara Steele, E-rank, been hunting for 6 years." She planted the butt of her axe on the cobblestones with a solid thunk. "Fenn says you can fight, says you killed that giant rat solo in 10 seconds. That true, or is he exaggerating again?" "It's true," Kayden said. "No point in false modesty. She'll see his abilities soon enough." Nara's eyebrows rose slightly. "Confident. I like that. Better than the usual rookies who piss themselves at the first sign of blood." She glanced at Fenn. "You get the contract details?" Fenn nodded eagerly, pulling a crumpled piece of parchment from his robe. "Forest goblins, about 20 in the group, led by a chieftain. They've been raiding farms on the eastern edge of Shadow Needle, killed 3 people last week, stole livestock, burned a barn. The contract pays 10 gold pieces for proof of the chieftain's death. Once the leader's gone, the rest should scatter." "Should," emphasized. "Goblins are stupid, but they're vicious in numbers. We go in smart, we stay coordinated, and nobody tries to be a hero." Her eyes fixed on Kayden, especially not rookies who think they're invincible because they got lucky once. Kayden considered pointing out that a decade of survival in the Abyss was more than luck, but kept silent. Words were still difficult, and he'd learned that showing was more effective than telling anyway. "Right," Fenn said, sensing the tension. "So, the cave is about 3 hours northeast, just inside the forest boundary. We should get there by mid-morning, clear the goblins, and be back by evening. Easy contract, straightforward. What could go wrong?" Nara snorted. "You're a walking disaster, Fenn. Everything goes wrong around you." "That's not..." "Okay, that's mostly fair," Fenn admitted. "But I've been practicing. I've got 3 healing spells ready, and I promise not to experiment with anything explosive this time." "This time," Nara muttered, but she was already moving toward the city gates. Come on, daylight's wasting, and I want this done before the goblins get their night vision advantage.
The journey to the goblin cave was quieter than Kayden expected. Nara led the way with the confidence of someone who'd walked these paths dozens of times, her axe resting easily on her shoulder. Fen walked in the middle, occasionally pointing out interesting plants or rock formations with the enthusiasm of someone who found the world genuinely fascinating despite its tendency to explode in his face. Kayden brought up the rear, his senses extended, cataloging every sound and movement in the forest around them. It wasn't Shadow Needle this time. The terrain was different, flatter, with more undergrowth and less of the towering conifers that had surrounded Greyhaven. The morning sun filtered through the canopy in golden shafts, illuminating clouds of pollen and small insects. Birds sang. Somewhere in the distance, a stream gurgled over rocks. Normal. Peaceful. Wrong. In the abyss, silence meant predators. Here, the absence of danger was somehow more unsettling than its presence. So, Nara said without turning around, Fen says you're from Ashfall. That the village that got wiped out by plague? Yes. And you weren't there when it happened? No. Left before. 10 years ago. At 12? Nara glanced back, her expression skeptical. Where the hell does a 12-year-old go alone? Kayden's jaw tightened. The standard answer, survived, don't want to talk about it, formed on his tongue. But something about Nara's direct, no-bullshit approach made him give her more truth than usual. Somewhere bad. Somewhere I had to learn to fight or die, every day. Nara studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes taking in the visible scars on his arms, the way he held himself, the sword at his side. Huh, she finally said. That explains the eyes. My eyes? They're dead, kid. Like you've seen everything worth seeing and found it all disappointing. She turned back to the path. I've got eyes like that. So does everyone who's been hunting long enough. Most people don't get them at 22. I'm older than I look, Kayden said quietly. Yeah, Nara agreed. You are. They walked in silence after that, but it was a different quality of silence, less suspicious, more understanding. The kind shared by people who'd both stared into darkness and come back changed. Then, oblivious to the undercurrent of the conversation, started chattering about goblin behavior patterns and optimal tactical approaches. Most of it was textbook theory that would disintegrate on contact with reality, but Kayden listened anyway. Information was survival, even imperfect information. The cave entrance appeared after 2.5 hours of walking, a dark gash in a hillside, partially hidden by thorny bushes and fallen logs. The smell hit Kayden first. Unwashed bodies, rotting meat, feces, and something else, sharper and more acrid. Blood. Fresh blood. They're home, Nara said, her voice dropping to a low growl. She unslung her axe, testing its weight with a few practice swings. Then, you stay back and heal as needed. Don't engage unless one gets past us. Kayden. She paused. You said you can fight. Prove it. Stay on my left flank, watch for ambushes, and don't do anything stupid. On 3, Nara counted quietly. 1, 2, 3. She charged. The inside of the cave was exactly what Kayden expected. Cramped, foul-smelling, littered with bones and scraps of cloth that had once been clothing. The goblins were waiting, their yellow eyes gleaming in the darkness, guttural voices rising in alarm as the hunters entered. 20 of them, just as the contract said. Small, 1.2 meters at most, with green-gray skin, oversized ears, and mouths full of sharp, jagged teeth. They wore scraps of leather and fur, wielded crude weapons, clubs, rusty knives, sharpened sticks. Individually, they were weak. Together, in confined space, they were dangerous. Nara didn't hesitate. She plowed into the center of the group like a battering ram, her axe sweeping in wide arcs that sent goblins flying. Her technique was pure brutality. No finesse, no wasted movement, just overwhelming force applied with perfect timing. A goblin leaped at her face. She caught it mid-air with her free hand and slammed it into the cave wall hard enough to hear bones crack. Fen, she roared as a crude knife opened a gash across her forearm. Heal!
Green light flickered behind them as Fen channeled his viral energy. The wound on Nara's arm closed slowly, much slower than a proper healer could manage, but it closed. Kayden moved. His style was the opposite of Nara's overwhelming power. Where she charged forward like a landslide, he flowed through the chaos like water finding the path of least resistance. 3 goblins rushed him, clubs raised. He sidestepped the first, his blade opening the creature's throat in a single economical slash. The second goblin's downward strike hit empty air as Kayden pivoted, his sword punching through the creature's chest from the side. The third tried to flee. Kayden's blade found the base of its skull with surgical precision. 3 dead in as many seconds. No wasted energy, no hesitation. Just efficiency born of 10,000 kills in a place where inefficiency meant death. He moved deeper into the cave, his eyes adjusted to the darkness better than the goblins expected. A creature dropped from the ceiling, aiming for his head with a sharpened bone. Kayden sensed the displacement of air above him, shifted his weight, and the goblin impaled itself on his rising sword. Another 5 goblins formed a defensive cluster, their chieftain barking orders in their harsh language. Kayden circled them, patient, waiting. One broke ranks, charging with a rusty sword. Kayden deflected the clumsy strike and severed the tendon above the creature's ankle. As it fell, screaming, he was already moving to the next target. 12 goblins dead in 60 seconds, not from luck, not from superior strength or speed, though 10 years in the Abyss had honed both to inhuman levels, but from understanding. Understanding of angles, of timing, of how bodies moved, and broke, and died. Holy shit, he heard Nara breathe behind him. The goblin chieftain stepped forward. It was larger than the others, almost human-sized, maybe 1.7 meters tall. Its skin was darker, scarred from countless fights, and it wielded a massive club studded with iron nails that had clearly been scavenged from human victims. Intelligence gleamed in its yellow eyes, not human intelligence, but cunning nonetheless. It had watched Kayden kill a dozen of its warriors with contemptuous ease. Now it was its turn. The chieftain roared and charged, surprisingly fast for something carrying such a heavy weapon. The club came down in an overhead strike that would have pulverized Kayden's skull, ribs, and most of his torso if it connected. Kayden's body began to move, muscle memory and trained reflexes preparing to dodge. The scar on his right palm pulsed. Heat, not painful but intense, spreading from his palm up his forearm in a flash. Time seemed to slow, not actually but perceptually, his enhanced danger sense pushing into overdrive. He could see the club's trajectory with crystal clarity, could calculate exactly where his body needed to be to avoid it, could feel. Something inside him stirred, power, waiting, dormant but present. The shard's gift integrated into his flesh, ready to be called. Kayden moved. The club missed him by centimeters, so close that wind displacement stirred his white hair. But he wasn't just dodging. He was faster, sharper, more precise than he should have been. The split-second burst of enhanced capability let him not only evade, but counterattack in the same motion. 3 strikes, textbook execution. First, the chieftain's left knee, the blade severing the tendon and ligament in a single cut. The creature's leg buckled. Second, the right elbow, destroying the joint, making the club tumble from nerveless fingers. Third, the throat, bone sword edge opening the carotid artery with clinical precision. The chieftain fell, blood pumping from the neck wound, his eyes already glazing over. The remaining goblins, maybe 6 or 7 still alive, broke and ran, their crude weapons clattering to the cave floor as they fled into the deeper tunnels. Silence fell, broken only by labored breathing and the drip of blood on stone. "Fucking hell," Nara said into the quiet. She was staring at Kayden, her axe lowered, blood spattering her armor and face. That was beautiful. Brutal, but beautiful. Where the hell did you learn to fight like that? Kayden looked at his right hand. The scarlet scar pulsed faintly, the cracked star pattern glowing with internal light that faded even as he watched. Practice, he said quietly. Then, more honestly, survival. Fen stepped forward, his glasses askew, his face pale. Kayden, your hand, it's glowing. Did you feel that? That was energy manifestation. You activated something. Felt it, Kayden confirmed. The sensation was already fading, leaving behind a hollow feeling in his chest and a faint tremor in his limbs. Whatever had awakened, it had only been for a moment, a glimpse of power, not its full reality. But it had been there, real, waiting. Nara approached the chieftain's corpse, pulling a long knife from her belt. Fen, get the ears, contract proof. She glanced at Kayden. You okay? You look like you just ran a marathon. Tired, Kayden admitted. The brief burst of enhanced capability had drained something from him, not physically, but deeper. His soul, maybe, or whatever metaphysical resource powered the shard's gift. That happens, Nara said, her tone surprisingly gentle. First time using a higher energy always takes it out of you. You'll build endurance. She paused. Though I'm surprised you've got one at all. You didn't register any energy signature at the guild, did you? No, nothing showed up on the detection spell. Nara and Fen exchanged glances. Weird, Fen said. Higher energies always require mana as a foundation, but you're not showing mana and you're manifesting something. That's not supposed to be possible. Many things aren't supposed to be possible, Kayden said, but they happen anyway. The journey back to Greyhaven was quieter than the trip out. Nara walked beside Kayden now instead of ahead, her expression thoughtful. Fen brought up the rear, occasionally muttering about energy theory and impossible manifestations, trying to puzzle out the mystery of Kayden's abilities. You know, Nara finally said, Fen and I work together pretty regularly, him healing, me hitting things with my axe. But we could use a third, someone who can actually kill efficiently instead of just making a lot of noise. Are you saying I make a lot of noise? Kayden asked. It might have been humor, he wasn't quite sure anymore. I'm saying you turn fights into art, Nara said bluntly. Violent, bloody art, but art. Those strikes on the chieftain? Perfect. I've seen A-ranked hunters with less precision. She shifted her axe to her other shoulder. So, you want to team up? Regular contracts? Split the pay 3 ways? Watch each other's backs? Kayden considered this. In the Abyss, partnerships didn't exist. Everything was predator or prey, and trust was a luxury that got you killed. But here, in this world, maybe things could be different. Fen had proven himself surprisingly useful despite his weak abilities. Nara was a competent warrior who didn't ask too many questions about his past. And working in a team? The concept was foreign, frightening, but also perhaps worth exploring. Okay, he said. Nara grinned, the expression transforming her harsh features into something almost friendly. Good. Fair warning, I drink too much, I swear a lot, and I have opinions about pretty much everything. But I keep my word, I don't leave teammates behind, and I kill monsters dead. We clear? Clear. Excellent. Fen, you're in charge of not exploding things for at least a month. Think you can manage that? I make no promises, Fen called from behind them. The walls of Greyhaven came into view as the sun reached its zenith. Kayden felt the strange pulsing in his palm again. Fainter now, just a whisper of the power that had manifested in the cave. Whatever the shard had done to him, whatever it had awakened, was still there, dormant but present, waiting. For the first time since returning from the Abyss, Kayden felt something that might have been hope. He was adapting, learning to exist in this world that was so different from the hell he'd survived. Making connections, tenuous, fragile, but real. Maybe, eventually, he could learn to be human again. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, he'd killed goblins, earned gold, and discovered he had power beyond simple physical skill. Today was enough.
Thank you for listening. New chapters will be released daily on the channel. This audio material was produced exclusively for the Section 56 channel. All rights reserved. Have a nice day.